Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to you that most people don't know? Please remember to like, share, hype, and subscribe. It was 2 a.m. and the folks were dead asleep. My room was on the other side of the house, so I may as well have been. There was a pretty bad storm outside, and I was just on my PC playing Eve when the landline phone started ringing. Now, this isn't uncommon during a storm for it to ring once or twice at random, I guess due to lightning hitting close to the vicinity of the phone lines. But this time, it keeps ringing. Eventually, I pick it up and ask who's calling. The second I do, I feel something standing behind me. It's not just a, hey, there's something there. It's the kind of overwhelming presence that freezes you in place and keeps you from turning around to see it. There's a voice on the phone, but it sounds like trying to listen to somebody screaming underwater. This goes on for about 5 minutes, then the phone cuts out, and whatever I felt behind me disappears immediately. The creepier thing with the phone is it was a set of wireless handhelds, and there was one in my folks' room as well. For some reason, they never heard it. That house was one of 3 fairly isolated lots on a mountain in a very rural part of Tennessee. That one's of a load of creepy things that happened to me living there. I've got a couple. When I was like 10, my mom ran across town to pick up my siblings from the babysitter. I had just gotten home off the school bus and was home alone. Our house phone rang, and it was a man. It sounded like a voice I knew, but couldn't quite place it, because I thought it was someone I knew. When they asked where my mom was, I said she'd be back in a few minutes. They began to tell me how pretty I was, and then asked me if I'd like them to do something super sexually explicit. I hung up and made sure every door was locked. I called my mom's cell phone and told her someone called the house and said something really, really bad, but never got the courage to tell her what they said. She checked the caller ID, and it was blocked, of course. I never told anyone what they said. My grandma died when I was 3. We were super close. After her death, I started being scared of our bathroom. At the time, my mom and I were living at my grandparents' house. I'd sometimes pee my pants even though I had been toilet trained for a long time. If I did get the courage to go into the bathroom, I'd leave the light on after I went and sped out of there. It was coming up on Christmas, which was my grandma's favorite holiday. She'd decorate the house with so much stuff in a specific way. My mom tried to decorate as closely to how my grandma did. It was clear she and my grandpa didn't have the heart for it. Right after finishing the tree, I ran into the living room from the bathroom, and they told me I needed to turn the light off. I apparently told them I couldn't, because Grandma was in there, and she needed me to keep the light on for her so she could see. And she was really mad at them for how badly they decorated the tree. Then the tree fell over. They immediately redecorated the tree to Grandma's standards. When I was around 16 or so, I had a boyfriend who lived just up the road from me. One night, he walked to my house and we were talking out back at the end of the driveway. When we went to go inside, I walked to the door first, and he was a little behind me. I turned to say something to him, and he was staring past me, pale. He said, "Whoa, what the hell?" I asked him what it was, and he said, "There was just an old man with a beard standing right behind you." I started panicking because I was on the top step of our back porch when it happened. Each step was only like 10 inches wide, so there was absolutely no room for anyone to be standing behind me. About 26 years ago, my dad died from complications from an organ transplant. He made it through surgery, but never ended up making it out of the hospital. Anyways, he was in the hospital for about 3 months. My mom and I stayed with him, and I visited for 10 to 12 hours a day. I was about 24 at the time, and thankfully had a super good boss back then that let me go stay with him and my mom. The hospital was about 5 hours from home. Anyways, The doctors told us he was getting better one time, so I went home and went back to work. Well, my dad ended up taking a turn for the worse, so I went back to the hospital with my mom. About 2 weeks later, he passed away. So I finally went back to work about 2 weeks after that. Back then I was apprenticing as a welder, so I was on a job with my helper, and I was prepping pipe in the back of my truck. I stopped grinding and flipped my welding helmet up and turned around. Nobody there. The helper was about 25 to 30 feet away digging in a ditch and went back to work grinding away when I got a hand on my shoulder again. But this time, the hand squeezed my shoulder hard enough to make me turn around before I lifted my lid. There was an empty field all around except the ditch where my helper was working. Nobody else was around. I screamed loud enough for my helper, asking what he wanted because my diesel welder was running. The helper looked up at me and said he never came over to me. There's zero chance that he could have covered that much space in this time I turned around, so I think maybe it was a sign from my dad. I don't know, but I know what I felt that day. I grew up in a middle-class town in the countryside. One day at age 15, I was at the bus stop a short distance from my house on a main busy road in my school uniform. A car pulls over on the opposite side of the road. A man winds down the window and beckons me over with his hand. I ignore him. He swings his car across the road and into the bus stop next to him. He throws open the door and says, "How much?" I say, "What?" And he replies, "How much for sex?" And I said, "Get in." At that moment, my nan comes around the corner in her car and sees me at the bus stop and stops to say hello. I go to her car and get in, and this man drives away. I was then surprised when I told my mom and she reported it to the police. I just thought it was funny. It's only in later life that I feel horribly anxious to think about what could have happened if my nan had not happened to drive by at that exact moment. Ugh. Almost 20 years ago, when I was in college, I went grocery shopping at Safeway. I walked into the store and immediately noticed a creepy guy staring at me. I didn't think much of it because he was standing in the checkout line, and I figured he would leave the store. So I go about my grocery shopping in the crowded store, and as I was shopping, he walked by me quickly and brushed up against me and apologized as if it was an accident. I gave him a weird look and continued my shopping. I went to a different aisle where the tea was, and I was spending a few minutes looking at the tea selection when all of a sudden, I felt like there was someone behind me. I turned around to see the same man's face inches away from my butt. He was crouched down, and he threw his wallet down real quickly and then tried to tell me that he dropped his wallet. It was clear at this point the guy was a major creep. I should have said something to someone. This is not the creepiest, but it's one of them. I was 21, alone, and had booked a taxi to take me to a family party. It showed up about an hour early. I was ready anyway, so I thought I would just go and help set up. I got in the cab and straight away he was asking where I was going and why, then switching to telling me about other girls he had picked up that week. I noticed he didn't look anything like the photo on his badge. He said he had cut and dyed his hair since the ID photo was taken. As I was already in a car with him halfway through the journey, I chose just to believe him, but I was skeptical. He started telling me, "You make money from airport runs." Looking back, I think he was trying to sound legit as a driver, and he went on about picking up an air stewardesses and having threesomes with them before they flew back out the next day. This taxi driver talked at 1,000,000 miles an hour and drove even faster. So much so, we arrived at the venue before it even opened. No one else was around, not even employees. We were so early, the taxi driver said he would wait with me. We were sitting in an empty car park outside on an empty bar. He offered me a cigarette, and I accepted. This seemed to make him think we were now best friends. He was definitely giving off creepy vibes, but I didn't know how to get away from him. He told me how hard it would be getting a taxi to come take me home later, as it was a Saturday night and they get so busy later on. He offered to give me his number so I could ring him to come back and get me at the end of the party, and because it was me, he would definitely take this job next. Then, he took my phone out of my hand and punched his number in. Then he rang his phone to check he put the numbers in right. But that meant he now had my number. He went on to tell me how he would wrap his dog's chain around his fist and punch it in the face to tighten it up. I was so relieved when my relatives started to arrive with the venue staff. He eventually left, reminding me to phone him later. At the end of the party, I stepped outside to call the cab only to see one sitting there. Obviously the same guy. I don't know if it was fear of upsetting him or because I'd had a drink by then, but I got in. He drove me home, still talking shite. We got to my street, and he more or less invited himself in. I had to make several excuses to get him to take no for an answer. When I eventually got out of the vehicle, I ran in and bolted the door, made sure all windows and blinds were closed, and just sat in the dark for a bit, hoping he didn't see which door I went in. I was so relieved to be rid of him. Until he rang me at 4 a.m. several months later to tell me he was on my street. This happened a few more times until I eventually blocked him. I think he got the hint, but I still feel uneasy about ever calling a taxi. It's a really tough situation when you're trying to be polite, but also your body language is saying like, this is the extent of it, and I don't want anything more to do with you besides this transaction. And people just don't see it, or they're just oblivious to nonverbal cues or even verbal cues. That's scary. And then these people have access to where you live. You gotta really pick your battles, and hopefully these car companies are doing a good enough screening that they can filter through some of the bad elements. But anyway, glad you're okay. I was driving to work when I saw a thick cloud of dust crossing the highway just ahead of me. I looked left and saw 4 locomotive cars flying sideways off the tracks and crashing into an empty field. I jumped out of my car and was the first person on the scene. It looked like walking through a sci-fi movie set. Random steel pieces stuck in the ground at odd angles. Then I came across the horn on the train and realized I was looking at the undercarriage. There was total silence. So much so, in fact, that the next person to arrive asked me, "How many days ago did this happen?" Then I could see the diesel fuel rushing from the punctured tanks and forming a small lake. I left as the fire department arrived. There was nothing they could do to save the 3 crew members. It was later determined that the train was not properly weighted. Instead of having 9 engines, it only had 4, and the brakes were bad on one of those. Physics did the rest after the train started down a steep mountain grade. The cleanup of the site took weeks. Each day, more train parts would be removed. Finally, the site was empty. I was 3 blocks away when I saw a tornado of fire going thousands of feet in the sky from the middle of the field. It turns out that the accident happened on top of a high-pressure JP4 pipeline. A brake shoe from the locomotive had embedded itself in the pipeline, which was buried at least 6 feet deep. A bulldozer was scraping the lot to remove contaminated soil. Eventually, he reached the brake shoe, which punctured the pipeline. Homeowners nearly a block away thought they heard it raining. It was the JP4 under about 250 psi pressure. The company running the pipeline noticed the pressure drop, but manually restarted their pumps nearly a dozen times. When the fuel ignited, over a dozen homes were lost and several people were killed. I haven't told anyone about this because I know people will perceive me as crazy. Back in 2013, I used to see this black hooded figure standing nearby my bed during the early morning hours, around 5 to 7 a.m. usually. At first, it would disappear within 5 seconds of my waking up. Then gradually, it would stand closer and closer every time I saw it. After about 2 months, this figure started communicating with me. It would reportedly tell me not to worship the Jewish God. I didn't know what it meant by that at the time. I also started seeing this creature when I was in college. It would harass me in ways that I don't want to go into. After months of frustration, I had a vivid dream where I was standing behind this guy dressed in a white robe. Right across from us was this black hooded figure. The guy in the white robe asked me to tell this black hooded figure to go away in his name. He asked me to repeat the phrase. I did, and the black figure went away. I felt like this dream came from God, because he saw how frustrated I was getting after being harassed by this creature for months. I decided to do what was shown in my dream. Next time this black creature appeared, I uttered the same phrase that was dictated to me in the dream. It made a growling noise and disappeared. After doing this a couple of times over the next couple of days, the creature stopped appearing, and my life returned to normalcy. I haven't seen this creature since 2014. When we were dating, my husband bought me a ring for my 16th birthday. A plain gold wishbone ring with a few small fake diamonds on the front. It wasn't expensive at all. We then got engaged and married, had kids, etc. We lived in a rented house, and I had a mug tree beside the stove. I kept my engagement ring and the birthday ring on a hook on the mug tree when cooking, cleaning, etc. I hated my engagement ring. The birthday ring meant so much more to me, and I cherished it. Anyways, I was cleaning after dinner one night and knocked over the mug tree. I heard the rings fall, but couldn't find them anywhere. We pulled out the stove, checked all behind it, and checked any crevices on the stove in case they had bounced up from the floor, but no. We never ever found the rings. We moved house 5 years later, and everything in this house was brand new. So the old stove was dumped from the original house. There was a glass corner cupboard in the new house that was for showing off nice ornaments, etc. I had placed new shot glasses in there. I had often lamented about my missing rings and told everyone that my 16th birthday ring meant so much more to me than my engagement ring. 7 or 8 years later, I was in the corner cupboard looking for something when I lifted and down one of the shot glasses, and there, inside it, was my birthday ring. I felt like I had been shot. I swear I could hardly breathe with shock. It's unexplainable and so unbelievable that I don't often tell this story, as I know the few that I've told who were family members thought I had lost the plot. I had a stalker while I was in high school. My high school boyfriend, who I thought was 18 because he was a year ahead of me in school, was actually nearly 22. He was held back a few times. So he was 21 when I was 16, which was when we started dating. He kept pressuring me to be intimate and made plans for us to marry. I broke it off a few weeks after I found out his real age. Well, after I broke up with him, he spent most of my senior year following me around. He would wait outside my school and watch everything I did. He would follow me to my babysitting jobs, hang around my street, the works. I saw him several times, but he never approached me, just followed. He even tried reporting me to my father whenever he saw me talking to a boy, or how I was getting into a strange man's car. A family I babysat for would pick me up sometimes. It was the mom, sometimes the dad. My father threatened to have my ex arrested if he kept bothering us. It was creepy. He was always there. Finally, he stopped before I left for college. In my childhood home, which was very old, I experienced sleep paralysis somewhat regularly throughout my adolescence. The same being always stood in the corner of my room. It was too tall for the room and had to hunch at the ceiling. I also distinctly remember its very large hands. I'd watch shadows from outdoor tree branches moving in the wind and the occasional headlights of cars playing across my ceiling. And we would regard each other until I was able to move again. On only one occasion did I experience something different. I woke lying on my side, and I could feel the weight of something sitting behind me on the bed. It was making a very loud, glottal fry, croaking sound. I believe that it was the same being. That was truly terrifying. After moving out, I never dealt with sleep paralysis again. Years later, during a random conversation with my little sister, the whole thing came up, and she told me that she had encounters with the exact same being. While we lived there, neither of us had any idea that we were both seeing it. My partner had been having sleep paralysis every single night. It was always an ashy figure trying to get him to stay in his house. He was in the process of moving and had been staying with me for a while. While we were cleaning out his room, I found a really cool vintage mirror. He gave it to me and I went home. The next day I went over to help some more, and then we were on our way to my house when a car hit me, going 50 miles per hour while at a stoplight. Neither of us were too badly injured, thankfully. Turns out, the mirror was from his mom, who told us it was 200 years old. His family has a lot of dark shit in their history. Think Black Forest Germany and dark witchcraft. We went to check on the mirror in the car, and it was all scratched up on the back, but not broken. My parents did a cleansing ritual and got rid of the mirror. During the ritual, my partner was visibly sick. Once it was over, the sleep paralysis stopped completely. I don't even really believe in anything, but I do believe there was something very dark going on with that mirror. In our circles growing up, all of us kids were constantly dragged around during the week, spending evenings at Christian prayer meetings or Bible studies or choir practices. None of our parents noticed us kids, their own kids. It was always about growing the Lord's kingdom, looking out for the poor and picking up and feeding busloads of immigrant women and children. Inside the venue or house, the adults were busy yapping away about their experiences with God, one ego battling another. Meanwhile, all us kids were out in the backyard in the dark, where the minister's son, who was around 15 years old, was busy coercing all the other children under 10 years old that his penis was a lollipop and everyone should have a taste. He was very, very scary, intimidating, and forceful. He was forcing kids in one by one. When he held his cock out for me to have a suck, I pushed another kid in front of me and said, "Nah, it's his turn." Then I ran to my mum's car and waited the rest of the evening out in the car park, traumatized from the events. I still know 2 of the boys who sucked dick that night. They never recovered. They were under 10 years old at the time. One of the boys has never spoken again and has had permanent care ever since. He's now 39 years old. And the other had been bed rotting ever since. He's now 30. I tried to tell my parents, the minister, and the boys' parents, talking about what happened many, many times. Every time, all the adults blank over and enter full denial. They make it seem as though I'm lying and something like this would never happen at their wholesome religious events. 15 years after that event, we met the minister again, my parents' friends. I had moved on and forgotten all these people long ago. To my horror, the minister's son appeared to greet me. Not only that, he was now, and had been for the last 15 years, a Sunday school children's teacher. Now let me tell you, he was oozing disgustingness. He was so yuck. I could tell immediately he had been SAing since our event 15 years ago till now, and nobody had stopped it. He reached out for a hug and said, "Long time no see." I became enraged and yelled at my parents and his. How dare this yucky man be standing here pretending to be a friend? How dare he be around children still? What is wrong with you people? Why won't you see the obvious truth? Once again, I was scolded and told to leave the vicinity for being rude and unjustified anger. I was fuming, but swore to drop it and get on with life. 2 weeks later, that gross man was found molesting multiple children in Sunday school, and years of abuse were uncovered. So yeah, even though I told many people about it, no one believes me to this day. And the 2 boys I know who are now men are effed.